Hey guys, tonight we're about to plunge into a world wilder than a cat in a room full of laser pointers. The absurdly superstitious lives of sailors in the age of exploration. These weren't your everyday seafaring folk. They were a motley crew convinced that a spilled salt shaker would summon the Kraken, or that whistling on deck would blow them straight to Davy Jones's locker. So before you strap on your best sea legs, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. If you have a moment, leave a comment telling me what odd superstitions you've come across. Whether that's tossing a coin or knocking on wood, it's always fascinating to see what people believe. Now dim those lights, perhaps get a warm blanket and settle in. Maybe even make a cute little fort just in case a rogue wave of nonsense comes crashing in. Let's take a second here. Have you ever wondered if sailors actually believed they could turn into mermaids? Did they really think a boa constrictor on board was a sign of good luck? Was there ever a party thrown on a ship that didn't end in at least one person getting thrown overboard for catching a fish with a broken net? What was the deal with the colours in those old-timey sea shanties? And now, congratulations! You've just woken up aboard a creaky galleon in the year 1520. The salty air tickles your nose, and you can hear the distant sound of men arguing about whether a crow landed on their ship for good or ill. Buckle up, because we're going for a ride. As dawn breaks over the horizon, you can feel the excitement bubbling like a misbehaving pot of stew. A voyage is about to begin, and each sailor is clutching their lucky trinkets. An old coin, a rabbit's foot or worse, a clump of hair from a lady who didn't quite give her consent. What's the verdict on whether these symbols actually work? Spoiler alert, absolutely none of them do, but that doesn't stop anyone from believing fervently. The murky waters of superstition. They swirl around like a school of fish with questionable motives. You might picture a grizzled captain, a wooden leg, and an eye patch declaring to his crew that any imbalance on board could summon a gale force worthy of a Jaws sequel. Take a look at the sailors now, gathered around the ship's bow like superstitious penguins, with expressions etched deep enough to signal the historical trauma of every sailor ever lost to fate or a particularly angry sea. Their eyes dart from talisman to talisman, hoping that whatever they've stumbled upon will somehow guarantee a smooth sail. While squinting into the sunrise, the cabin boy informs you that it's crucial to have the right mix of charms. After all, no one wants a sea monster popping up mid-journey because you forgot to bring your lucky doll. History's murmurs echo here, a warning from the lost souls of legend who might forget to pack an extra jar of pickles but would rather feather their caps with the top-sea sentiment of bad luck. But what if you're a doubter? Never fear. The ships of old were teeming with enough superstition to drown out even the staunchest of skeptics. And as you shuffle through the crowd, you overhear old Sailor McGregor swear up and down that his grandmother used to read tea leaves after every storm, claiming it kept the gales at bay. How? Nobody knows. But there's a certain magic to fishermen mingling with the tales of blindfolded oracles and salt-caked forecasters who predict weather with the accuracy of a stopped clock. It's comforting to think that tattered bits of lore might guide your fate more reliably than the flickering compass in the captain's hold. As the ship starts moving, you can almost hear that loud creaking of wood warning you of peril, but it's accompanied by the near-festive energy of gathered sailors who have downed one too many rations of questionable grog. They shuffle about, whispering hopeful incantations, confidently asserting that the power of the ocean is broken by the strength of belief alone. Mess with the balance and well, you might just end up swimming with the sharks. Or worse, be stuck on deck with someone attempting to pass off a soggy biscuit as fancy sea cuisine. Bon appétit. And speaking of food, every sailor knows it comes with quirky quirks of its own. Whether it's a ship's captain insisting that a missing biscuit could ruin the luck of the entire voyage, Or another deckhand throwing a handful of sea salt overboard to appease. The sea gods, culinary catastrophes unfold as fast as the ship lists. As you observe, it becomes clear that every hullabaloo serves as an ulterior motive. Someone might just be trying to distract from the fact that last week's fish has turned into a culinary disaster. With each wave lapping against the hull, you wonder if the next man in line with his bundle of good fortune will drown in a sea of bad seafood, or if maybe, just maybe, those charms from rabid sailors are more of a group bonding experience than functional help. A sailing expedition wasn't just about reaching distant shores, it doubled as a sort of group therapy session, mixed with mythic fear and a sprinkling of nonsense. So, as the sun rises higher in the sky, marking the beginning of this wild adventure, you can't suppress the chuckle building within. Here it is, the extraordinary journey of men turning prayers into practice like old wives' tales, navigated by whispers through the waves. Will they follow their superstitions, or will fate take a detour? Your guess is as good as theirs, but one undeniable truth remains. On this ship, the sea is their canvas, and superstition paints every corner with colours of bravado and ridiculousness that make you feel ready to join them in this grand adventure. After all, at the heart of every good expedition is a healthy dose of belief, no matter how misplaced it might be. Picture this. You're on a boat, and the sea is shimmering invitingly beneath the sun. Suddenly, someone spots a figure bobbing in the waves. A mermaid! But hold on, how many bottles of rum has Tommy downed? As sailors passionately debate whether these legendary creatures exist or are just the byproduct of too much salt water and bad food, you can't help but wonder, if mermaids did exist, would they want to join this crew, or would it just be a seafood buffet gone horribly wrong? Let's address the fishy elephant in the room. Mermaids, they're not exactly the best advert for hygiene. Imagine the gills, the scales, and the likelihood that they haven't bathed since that last rave off of Atlantis. Yikes! Most sailors believed they were enchanting beings, enticing men to their watery demise with hauntingly beautiful songs. However, you're more suspicious, wondering whether these so-called sirens are really just one too many fishtails caught in the nets of drunken dreams. Aren't they just sea lions with a glow-up, you muse? As the debate rages on among your fellow sailors, the ship's bard decides to lead a shanty dedicated to these elusive creatures. Picture it. Rough, salty hands on a weathered ukulele, belting out a tune about scales and suckers. It's catchy enough to have everyone clapping along, but would a mermaid even have ears? You'd think they prefer silence over dealing with sailors' tuneless crooning. Or perhaps they'd be rolling on the ocean floor gasping for air. Who can tell? Then there's Old Man Jack, the ship's grizzled navigator, insisting he caught a glimpse of a mermaid, claiming she had long hair the colour of kelp and a tail that glimmered like molasses. He argues that anyone with enough barrels of rum under their belt would have seen a mermaid too. After all, the sea reveals its secrets only to the most uninhibited. But maybe Old Man Jack mistook that flopping sea cucumber for beauty. It's simply not a good look for anyone when sea life gets confused with libido. As the ship sails deeper into the misty horizon, the cabin's atmosphere shifts from drunken incredulity to genuine fear. Another drunken sailor leaning overboard to get a better look at that so-called fin suddenly vanishes from the port side. Was it a mermaid that lured him away, or was it his own gravity working against him? Hopefully he just slipped. Nobody wants to be blamed for attracting a siren song, especially if it comes with a side order of regret and saltwater nightmares. And speaking of nightmares, if you ever do bump into a mermaid, do you really think they would share their vast underwater kingdom? Or would they serve you up as next week's special, sautéed in butter and garnished with seaweed? That's the real kicker. You start to imagine what's on the menu in an underwater kingdom. Probably crustaceans with attitude problems and eels with attitude adjustments. Can we get an emoji for send? Help? You think with a chuckle, realising the mermaids might not be the friendliest hosts. Even as the tales grow wild, some say mermaids grant one wish, but deep down you're convinced that nothing good comes from hopping a ride on the back of a fishwoman, regardless of how many bottomless mimosas you've had at the last port. Yet your crew seems to be convinced, curiously piecing together every fishy rumour from fellow drunken seamen. It all sounds like a plot twist right out of a fable, a fish tale for the ages, if you will. As dusk settles, the conflicting narratives blend into the hazy light of twilight, with flickers of silver reflected in the surf. Sailors alternately toast to the beauty of mermaids and grimly eye the waves. Will your ship be the next to disappear in the depths, or is it all just the result of too many salty tales and too little time with actual livestock? Who knows? But as the winds shift, bringing both adventure and salt-kissed memories, you're invigorated by the wild mystery of the ocean. Mermaids, myths, or mere mirages, they're as eternal and unpredictable as the tides that guide your journey. Whatever they turn out to be, here's hoping they prefer live bait over sailors, at least until you make it back to port. The noble goldfish, often considered a symbol of good luck. But on a ship, you've got to be kidding. Crew members are ready to toss any fish overboard lest they tempt fate, believing it to carry ominous omens. Ever had a mundane meal ruined by a creature from the brine? Welcome to your new diet. One of salt pork and, look, a fish. Cue the panic. The kitchen below deck is dim and smells vaguely like a combination of seaweed and bad decisions. You can hear the crew arguing about a recent catch of herring, and someone is claiming that keeping it on board would doom them to a month of bad luck. "I'm telling you," one burly sailor shouts, arms flailing like a fish out of water as he slops a pot of congealed stew. You can't trust fish. They're like little swimming curses just waiting to ruin your day. You roll your eyes, but deep down, a small part of you wonders if he's onto something. After all, the last time you caught fish for dinner, an unexplained thunderstorm sunk a neighbouring ship. Coincidence? Maybe. But lucky herring? Definitely not. As you stand there, peering into the murky depths of the ship's store, it dawns on you. Fish aren't merely dinner. They're a full-blown superstition. Your friend Jack swears he once saw a fish change colour as it floundered on deck, and surely that was a sign of doom. The notion seems ridiculous until you notice how the crew avoids eye contact with a glinting mackerel perched on the edge of a barrel. It's as if the fish is keeping a ledger of fines for every bad word spoken in its presence. Someone decides it's time to hold a no-fish ceremony. They gather around the mackerel, asking it for forgiveness, as if the fish holds sway over the ocean's wrath. "Spare us the storms, O mighty fish," they chant in mock reverence. Only now it seems it's less about showing respect and more about inducing belly laughs. However, as you look around at the anxious faces of your shipmates, it suddenly feels like you're bearing witness to some ancient rite. Might as well grab a tambourine while you're at it. The rituals get crazier as the sea rolls beneath, and your stomach growls in sympathy for the calamari that never was. But what happens if the fish in question is a live one? If your shipmates believe in their captivating powers, perhaps you shouldn't mess with fate. You eye the fish suspiciously. It sways side to side, mocking your apprehension. After several more inappropriate jokes made at its expense, the crew agrees they need to toss it back, and the haul goes overboard with a tiny splash. Good riddance, but not a moment too soon. Seconds after its release, the clouds above part with ominous grumbling. The winds howl like a chorus of scorned spirits, and you can't help but feel a twinge of guilt for the aquatic casualty. Maybe it was innocent after all. The newly fish-free air tastes fresher, like freedom itself, but routine allegations of unlucky, troublesome fish plague dinner conversations. You take in a morsel of salt pork dry as sandpaper, and it's almost an insult to eat at this point. Food of sailors, you mutter dryly, wishing for a proper meal. Rest assured, no sailor in their right mind would ever sample the catch of the day, not while any fish gallivanting around could be deemed a witch's familiar. Word spreads about the calamity encountered by the last crew who dared accept fish as good luck. The story balloons into something that could put a fable to shame, with malicious sea spirits conjuring chaos as soon as a sailor bit into a piece of fried flounder. Instead of steak nights or even baked potatoes, it's total chaos or utter ration instead. A landlubber's feast suddenly transforms into a nightmare aboard this ship. So, as you starve from the lack of good food, and your crewmates engage in in-depth discussions about fishy fables for sustenance, consider this. Sometimes the true curse lies not in the luck attached to what could have been, but in the imagination and traditions of those who sail upon the salty seas. One fish overboard spells a diet of despair, and a very dry ship. And as you count your blessings for every meal, you can't help but wonder if the real misfortune lies in the taste of the sailors in your midst. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to give fish a second chance, while someone else watches the skies. The sails are hoisted, and they flutter in the wind like a group of excited children. However, not all colours are created equal in a sailor's eye. Red might be dandy on a flag or a lobster, but on a sail? You might as well be inviting disaster over for a cup of tea. So why all this chatter about colours? Is it really just ancient traditions? Or is someone hiding behind the mast tossing paint cans at unsuspecting crews? Imagine this. You're standing on the deck of a ship just painted bright crimson, and you're half expecting Poseidon to leap out from the depths, shaking a trident like it's a maraca at a fiesta. That's right. Sailors believed that painting a sail red was bad luck, and not just because it made the ship look like it just lost a fight with a pack of angry jellyfish. No, it was thought to invite misfortune storms, or maybe even an uninvited sea creature crashing the deck party. Why was red demonized? Perhaps the shade was too close to the colour of blood, and sailors simply didn't fancy themselves as dinner for an ocean beast. Now let's take a look at blue. Blue was the favoured hue for sails, as it was believed to hold divine protection. A blue sail meant you weren't just a sailor. You were practically an honoured guest among the water deities. Just imagine flapping your cobalt sails and riding the waves like a glory-bound knight of the sea. It's like donning the robes of a brave prince before heading off to battle. But don't forget, just like all colour choices, there were exceptions, namely the varying shades of blue that might, or might not, decide what sort of watery fortune you'd enjoy. And what's that? A certain shade of green? Now we're getting into complicated territory. Green sails had just as many proponents as detractors. Some believed they brought good luck. Others, however, argued that they invited a full tidal wave of doom, with the ghosts of drowned sailors rolling up their spectral sleeves to ruin your day. Why? Because nothing says, "Send me to a watery grave," quite like a freshly painted green sail that pops like a renegade watermelon. It's like daring fate to toss you back to the depths below. As we frolic further down this colourful rabbit hole, we can't skip over yellow. Sailors often believed that yellow was the hue of cowardice. So if you were out there sporting a bright canary sail, you might as well just dip the mast in molasses and pre-book your farewell fish dinner. The last thing you'd want is to be mistaken for a weakling fighting against the briny abyss. Tough guys, or at least those pretending to be tough, flexed their manly muscles by refusing to adorn their ships with the sunny shade. Then you've got white sails. Ah, the elegant classic of the seas. White was supposed to symbolise peace and good fortune, ushering in calm weather and smooth sailing. As the wind caught the crisp linen, all the crew had to do was lean back and feel as though they were gliding on a sunbeam. Mind you, an unruly gust could turn your serene scene into a scene of high drama, like a soap opera played out on the rolling waves. A whirlwind of seagulls screeching might join your drama, as they protested your decision to sport that splendid white sail. Did someone forget to consider the aerial audience? But beyond the mere aesthetics and might be curses lurking around ship colours, sailors also indulged in more intricate rituals. Some would hold a small ceremony whenever a new sail was unfurled, complete with chanting, shaking of beads, or even a little dance while balancing on one leg like a pirate ballet. Or risk raising the ire of the sea gods. Alliances and handshakes were often made with fellow crew members in front of the newly painted sail as a pact of unity. Each colour acted not just as fabric, but as a character in this grand seafaring saga, where friendship, misfortune and the occasional mermaid sighting were regularly tossed into the mix. So the next time you hear about sailors and their beliefs about sails, remember it's a colourful spectacle filled with as much superstition as cloth, and truly admire them for turning their very vessels into canvases for their hopes, fears and whims. Because come on, what's sailing without a little drama and spectacle? In the end, a ship isn't just a vessel to transportation, it's a floating village tangled in lore, where colour combinations might bring forth the tempest or soothe the seas. So, dear friends, as you drift off from this maritime fantasy, let's raise a glass to brilliantly coloured sails and the quirky sailors who danced along the edges of superstition like it was an elaborate salty waltz upon the waves. You're humming a jig. A lovely tune, really. But uh-oh, the deckhands shoot you the stink eye. Apparently whistling on a ship is as bad as waving a big red flag at a bull. Turns out, you might just summon up a windstorm or, even worse, have the captain's anger raining down on you like, well, lead in a cannon. Can't catch a break, can you? Now, as each crew member sidles away from you like you've just announced you bought a one-way ticket to the bottom of the ocean, you find yourself pondering the roots of this curious rule. Whistling is the vessel's equivalent of declaring the cake is a lie, and let's be honest, as tempting as it may be to let those dulcet tones slip out, your fellow sailors are not ready to test the superstitions of the sea. After all, sailors are a practical bunch, and their minds have been hardened by years of sea spray, salt, and the occasional misunderstanding with an octopus. Who wouldn't be a little wary of someone thinking that a good tune could calm the ocean, or, just entertain the gulls? But what happens when you test this irksome edict? Well, as lore often goes, the squall clouds gather overhead like a bouncer at a bar waiting to kick your sorry self out after you've accidentally spilled a pint on the floor. The crew will tell you, with eyes full of portent, that the last lad who dared to whistle up a tune ended up bathed in a tempest that turned his ship into a cork bobbing around a stormy tea party. Did he ask for a side of disaster with his music? Probably not. But the sea has a way of punishing those who forget she has a mind of her own. If you're feeling especially cheeky and choose to defy this rule, your subsequent punishment will come swiftly. A squall will erupt without warning, and suddenly you're holding onto the rigging for dear life, praying to whatever deity governs sailors and poets alike. The wind screams like an angry banshee, while waves slap the sides of the ship with the enthusiasm of a disgruntled mother yelling at her children to clean their rooms. It's a raucous affair where your jazzy whistle has transformed into a discordant tune that even seabirds would shun. The irony is that while the act of whistling can send sailors running from you, as if you just announced a rat infestation, hulls creaking ominously in protest, children back on dry land find amusement in the notion of sailors unable to whistle at sea. What are they? some kind of musical scallywags with an aversion to melody. It's a bit comical to picture, right? To add a dash of humour to your precarious position, imagine this scene. While you cling to the rigging, legs wobbling like a baby deer, one poor soul stands swaying a little to the rock of the ship. He's ventured beyond whistling into the realm of full-on sea shanty. "What shall I do with a drunken sailor?" he bellows, and suddenly you realise you'd give anything for him to abandon ship, preferably on one of those inflatable thingamajigs that always seem to pop up at the worst moment. If he plummets overboard in a cringeworthy debacle, who's to say the sea won't envelop him in a victorious embrace before you're dragged down with him? As you dodge Widow's glares and the captain's curses, it dawns on you. Perhaps this is less about the sound and more about the deep-rooted fears shared among seafaring folk. You're standing amidst an entire culture steeped in rituals and gestures both absurd and sacred, like a bona fide nicotine-free sea monster that breathes down your neck if you dare test them. Why, one could write entire books simply on the art of avoiding disastrous superstitions, but no one on this ship even dares to consider such tomfoolery. In the end, whistling might just have to stay outside the captain's hearing. Who knew the simple pleasure of hitting a high note could become a liability? So, the next time you contemplate breaking into a cheerful jig, just remember that in the vastness of the salty sea, it's best to appreciate the music silently, perhaps through the calm sound of the waves lapping against the hull, or by pretending you've unleashed a chorus of harmonies within the vast ocean without appealing to its tempestuous temperament. After all, just because you're afloat doesn't mean you should sow the seeds of another sailor's misadventure. Time to silent dance your way through the waves, and pray you don't end up on the wrong end of a very wet and very salty reprimand. You've got one sailor claiming he's got good luck with a rabbit's foot, and then another is trying to explain why it's not just a foot, but a whole superstition. Who knew that carrying around a fuzzy appendage could unlock the secrets of the universe? Spoiler, it doesn't. Yet that doesn't stop sailors from treating it like a key to safe passage, until one of them nearly trips over it. Of course, this isn't just any rabbit's foot, it's a lucky rabbit's foot. It's been plucked from a rabbit plummeting toward its destiny as a stew. But somehow, it's become a symbol of fate and fortune for those voyaging the turbulent seas. But let's be real. If your luck is tied to a severed limb of a critter that probably ran faster than you, that's a slippery slope to misadventure. Just imagine if rabbits knew how much precariousness hinged on their feet. They'd likely demand hazard pay. Amid all the chatter, a third sailor, let's call him Old Barnacle Beard, pipes up, swaying in the damp air. You know, it's not just a foot. It's got to be from a rabbit killed in the waxing moon. Yes, because apparently lunar cycles dictate the luck that comes with a furry appendage, and Old Barnacle Beard must have taken an astronomy course for sailors. As they argue over which celestial alignment produces the best feat, you quietly wonder if they'll ever turn that rabbit into an entree. Can you eat luck? If it tasted like salted pork, well, then maybe. Then another sailor joins in, brandishing his own crumpled rabbit's foot like it's proof of life and prosperity. "This here, lads, is my trusty talisman." He waves it around like a proud flag at a victory parade, only to have it slip through his fingers and flop onto the deck with a decidedly unceremonious thud. Tensions rise as every eye fixes on the unfortunate foot, draped in the aftermath of their days on the high seas. Will it be lucky after this incident, or has the grip of misfortune already ensnared it? As you watch the drama unfold, consider how superstitions hold a peculiar grip on the minds of sailors, so similar to how they grip the railing when a storm brews. You've got some old-timers believing that if you carry a rabbit's foot, you'll win every dice game against squabbling crewmates, while others insist you need to pair it with a sprinkle of crushed starfish to unlock the power. Who needs GPS when you've got the power of a fuzzy foot and an esoteric recipe passed down through generations of confused mariners? But ultimately, what happens when this prized talisman doesn't deliver? Those unlucky sailors might soon find themselves on the wrong side of a storm, yelling at seagulls for not honouring the deal. Darn it! I should have gone with a potato! Everyone knows vegetables are guaranteed to bring good luck, right? Let's not forget, sailors aren't just concerned about their own luck either. If the boat makes it to shore and that rabbit's foot is in good shape, it signals a golden ticket for the crew. The enthusiasm builds until they land on solid ground, and suddenly it's foot races rather than foot faults. Who knew my bunny buddy had this much charm? Is right until the first fisherman casually strolls by, asking if someone's had a rough day. Of course, the comedic irony kicks in when you think about how many rabbits must have feigned death for the superstitions to work. It raises a metaphysical question. If a sailor is lost at sea but had a rabbit's foot in his pocket, did he ever truly lose, or was he merely freed from the burdensome luck of others? As the night descends upon the ship and the jackpot bunny foot debate rages on, you realise that in the world of sailors, luck isn't just a numbers game, it's a lifestyle. It's creating an ecosystem of peculiar beliefs that makes one wonder whether the universe is listening or simply chuckling gleefully at the absurdity. And so they continue, sharing tales and trading feet, all the while crafting memories under the stars, even if they're guided by the whims of a furry appendage. What could possibly go wrong? At this point, let's just make a toast to the rabbit, because clearly his foot has been carrying more than just a crew. It's been hauling the absurdity of the seas along with it. You've got a parrot and it's squawking on deck like it owns the place. Because truth be told, it sort of does. Sailors believe that their feathered companions could predict everything from fortune to misfortune. Yet, as you ponder the authenticity of a bird predicting storms, you begin to wonder if it's just mocking you, or planning a coup. These colourful winged buddies weren't just pretty faces. They were entrusted with the vital role of fortune tellers for the crew, mainly because, well, they couldn't be fired. Imagine the scene. The pirate captain jabs a finger at you and declares that the parrot's raucous squawking just saved the ship from a tempest. And all you could think was, what on earth did it say? Was it asking for crackers? Meanwhile, the parrot fluffs its feathers and squawks like it's discussing Shakespeare. Naturally, everyone pretends to take it seriously, as if a bird with a penchant for mimicking random words is some sort of oracle. You have to stifle a chuckle because the only real oracle is the one who's been drinking rum since dawn. As the crew fluffs up their egos on the belief that their pet parrots know more about the weather than meteorologists who invent their jobs, the whole situation spirals into absurdity. Each sailor claims their parrot delivers chilling prophecies, like warning whistleblowers about impending doom, or teasing the ship's doctor for overcooking the stew again. You see Captain Blackbeard's creature locked in a fierce debate with his rival, an ex-pirate turned parrot wrangler, over which sea route is most socking good. At this moment, their squabbles are more profound than any diplomatic affairs you've witnessed, but it gets weirder. Videos go viral with just a single tweet showcasing two parrots arguing, one saying storm coming and the other drowning out with more rum. These delightful feathered critters have the uncanny ability to distract from the impending dread of being out on the open ocean. It's a running joke that any ship's forecast can vary wildly based on what the parrot is mimicking, and good luck trying to figure out what counts as a legitimate forecast. Is it a simple chirp about fish, or the melancholy squawk of impending doom? As the days stretch on the ship, without much to do other than swabbing the deck or assessing whether you've captured an exotic rat as cargo, sailors increase their reliance on the feathered mavericks. It's a strange twist, a curiosity about whether these birds possess an otherworldly connection to the sea. By the time you're serving dinner, someone lops off a piece of fish for the parrot, declaring dinner a blessing. You can't help but wonder what would happen if parrot prophecy became a full-time job. Would they demand their own quarters if the captain went missing? Would other sailors quickly realise that parrot opinions about meals trump the ship's cook? Yet, believe it or not, some sailors were actually convinced that the birds assisted on a far more serious level than forecasting feast versus famine. Some would claim that capturing a parrot and training it in nautical lore bestowed good luck, especially while navigating treacherous waters. Clip the wings, train its mouth. That's the motto of one ambitious crew member notable for his unique ability to milk the magical superstitions that latched onto the feathers of these birds. In quieter moments when the wind died, sailors would gather round to listen to their parrots recite poetry. Or maybe it was just their best approximation of rhymes they had overheard. But as you scratch your head, wondering if that squawk, squawk, squawk was intended to be a love sonnet about the sea or just another dramatic retelling of last night's stew catastrophe, one thing becomes clear. Shared laughter over these outrageous little characters helps everyone survive the day. And God help you if you happen to drop a parrot. The horror. Sailors would break into a frenzy, worried that losing their feathered companion would bring a curse, like some terrible sailor's version of a "you break it, you buy it" policy. The ship would become a battleground as every last member scrambled to find the feisty beggar, to keep peace, and in the process, stick a fork in the world of superstition. In the end, whether these parrots genuinely possess magical foresight or serve only as vessels for nonsense, they undoubtedly connect sailors into a world that is equal parts camaraderie and chaos. Because in this wild dance of maritime life, laughter reigns, prophecies flutter, and maybe, just maybe, a squawking parrot is the closest thing to a sage advice you'll ever find sailing through the storms of uncertainty. Drifting through the cabin, you can smell the waxy scent of candles, and there's a heavy belief that an extinguished candle signifies impending doom. While you try to navigate through the swamp of superstitions, you can't help but think, what's next? Will you have to sacrifice a goat if you drop a fork? At this point, who even knows? The fate of the whole crew seems to lay heavily on the number of candles burning brightly in the dim quarters of the ship. It's quite a burden for these little wax torches to bear. Picture this. You're huddled around a dining table made from who knows what kind of wood, with fellow sailors nervously tracing the patterns in the grain, as if they're deciphering hieroglyphics. Each flickering glow of the candles feels like it's a fragile heartbeat. If one flickers too much or, heaven forbid, snuffs out completely, every sailor will involuntarily freeze and collectively hold their breath, as if waiting for an executioner's verdict. You glance around to see if anyone is brave enough to blow out a candle, a sure way to prompt a storm to arise on what was supposed to be a peaceful night. Among the crew, each candle becomes a gossiping sentinel watching over dinner. Mutual glances betray the simmering unease at the table. Is John flicking crumbs into the flame to test the fates? You turn your attention back just in time to see a gentle breeze waft through the window, almost as if the ship itself was an avid participant in this mystical charade. Good heavens, don't let that gust linger, or we'll have a deck of crewmates catapulting to the galley rubbernecking to see if the winds have whispered us on a path straight to Davy Jones's locker. Now, imagine for a moment that you're an early riser, squinting through the morning haze of a shipboard sun, desperately trying to remember whether you extinguished the candles the night before. If you didn't, your chances of surviving another day could wildly dwindle. As the sun rises, sailors cram into the galley, arms crossed, glaring at the leftover candles. The last cabin dweller who forgot to put one out, let's say Frederick, might as well be branded a sinner. destined to a fate far worse than a mere talk about haunted past voyages. The spectre of frustration hangs visibly above him, almost like the smoke from a half-burned wick, every flicker hinting that perhaps it was him that cursed the ramen last night. Living on a ship isn't just about sailing, it's about living amid the looming spectre of superstition, where even light becomes a tool for doom. Why, you ask? Because sailors don't just believe candles light their way. They believe light can ward off heinous creatures lurking in the sea's depths, watching and waiting to snuff out their lives. Each sailor would rather have a side of soot with supper than risk offending some ancient deity bent on defeating humanity with darkness. And while we're on the subject of unwarranted fears, let's take a quick detour into the land of fading light. If by chance you do find yourself stuck in the middle of a storm, the logic follows to hold on to your pipe dream of burning candles. But, then again, it turns out that your opportunity to connect with the cosmos hangs entirely in the balance of the survival rate of that fleeting candle. It might seem absurd, but candle lighting becomes a cosmic ritual, a lifeline to destiny, where the flicker wills stability, and blowing it out means inviting chaos. Grabbing one's heart instead of a fork might just make more sense. Soon you'll find that even a mere candle can spark a philosophical debate over dinner, creating weighty discussions between each mouthful of hardtack. Was it the gods' favour bestowed upon you for lighting 2 candles instead of 1, or actually just your common sense? During these meals you could speculate whether the heavens just laugh at such silly constructs, or simply chalk it up as cosmic entertainment. So, as another sleepless night approaches aboard this creaking vessel, remember the flickering tales that shape the lives of sailors. Hold the lit candle close, for tomorrow's voyage might depend on a mere whisper of belief, a fragile flame surviving against ferocity or folklore. Now, who knew a candle could be the key to unlocking a sailor's psyche? What a time to be adrift at sea, surrounded by the shadows of fear and the light of superstition. You've just knocked over a salt shaker, it spills onto the floor like the last remnants of sanity. Great. Now you'll need to toss some over your shoulder to avoid disaster, but this leads you to wonder if throwing each other's rations over the shoulder is really saving you from bad luck or just preparing the crew for a salt shortage. Because let's face it, at sea, rationing is no joke. That little mishap must feel like accidentally kicking your neighbour's cat. There's nothing worse than inviting turmoil while just trying to shake a little seasoning onto your gruel. In the grand tradition of sailors and their bizarre beliefs, spilling salt doesn't just mean rethinking your culinary choices, it's the kind of faux pas that calls for immediate action. If you've got a spare fish head handy, toss that over your left shoulder while simultaneously looking skyward for divine intervention, or at least a seagull to help you figure out what's going on. Somehow the idea that your bad mojo can fly away while you're trying to salvage your dinner by tossing food might just make sense in this surreal floating world. The reason for all this fuss. Legend has it that spilling salt brings bad luck and sailors are a superstitious bunch. Salt was once a precious commodity, traded more than gold in some instances, so spilling it would have meant wasting something essential, like pouring out the hopes and dreams of a whole crew. Imagine being the unlucky seafarer who caused everyone to starve. You'd not only be kicked off the ship, but you'd also have the eternal curse of being remembered as the salt spiller. The horror. But talking about accidents, ever tried to navigate a ship while holding a sack of potpourri? Of course not, because too much salt on board, you're asking for trouble, and believe me, not the good kind. Your fellow crew members are either throwing salt over their shoulders or cursing you and asking for a sea witch to cast protection spells. It's not just culinary mishaps, it's a ritualistic arm-lifting experience, an Olympic activity really. And what's even funnier is that while you're busy respecting the ritual of tossing salt over your shoulder, your charmingly grim captain is probably attempting to recall the last time they spilled salt and had to eat hardtack for a week. Fun fact, no one likes hardtack. It's the salt rationing ship's version of a survival cracker that tastes more like regret than any nourishing grain. If you think your shipmates don't whisper about who gets stuck with extra hardtack for the next fortnight, you'd be dead wrong. In the midst of this culinary chaos comes the arrival of an unexpected gust of wind. Will it blow away your troubles for good? Not a chance. Said wind might just whip up a storm fierce enough to convince everyone that the salt really was your fault for spilling it. As thunder rolls across the sky, your thought pattern shifts. Are you a sailor, bravely enduring the threat of the elements, or merely the brunt of your own clumsiness? Tough call, really. Here's another twist. The idea that passing salt with your left hand is somehow a gateway to disaster. As if passing the spices around in a social banquet can undo centuries of naval camaraderie. Picture this. You're in a huddle trying to commune over hardtack, and someone, likely looking for a good excuse to follow seafaring tradition, passes the salt with the left. Everyone gasps, clutching their imaginary pearls, while you stare wide-eyed, trying to control the brewing chaos around you. No matter how strange your crew's fixation is with this concept, it's clear one thing is certain. Throughout the wild waves and choppy seas, the belief in salt spills as harbingers of disaster only keeps growing. And who can blame sailors for sticking to their stories? After all, it's all fine and well until that fateful night when the ship starts rocking and you realise every half-hearted toss of salt reached the abyss. So next time you're dining on the deck and someone accidentally knocks over a container, brace yourself. You might need to throw that salt over your shoulder, say a few prayers, and avoid licking your wounds should the wrath of the sea make their presence known. Because trust me, when superstition collides with salt, the stakes are high and the risks are surely salty. Now, where's that bucket of extra salt? You might just need it, especially after that mishap. On this ship, the stars are more than just beautiful pinpricks of light. They're your guides, your compass, and the reason sailors argue about which constellation is prettier. As you're sailing under the night sky, will the stars bless your journey, or will you get lost while debating their relative attractiveness? It's a toss-up. On board, some light-hearted arguments break out as sailors explain that not all movements in the sky bode well for the voyage ahead. There's old Jack, for instance, convinced that the lesser-known constellation, Wolfus Ignoramus, a mythical creation from a drunken night at the docks, somehow influences when and how the fish bite. Give me a break, old Jack. As the night deepens, the clinking of mugs filled with lukewarm ale competes with the wind's howl. The moment transforms into a cosmic debate, and everyone has a theory to contribute. One sailor insists that the sight of a falling star is just a harbinger of ill fortune, while another argues that it's a divine invitation to make a wish for the economic stability of a ship, known for its unfortunate tendency to capsize when confronted with sharp rocks. Yet another sparkles on about the deeper mysteries of the Gemini twins, convinced they're plotting a cosmic rebellion against the serfdom below him. Will they choose to sink ships or save them? Better keep an eye on those celestial mischief makers. But it's not just the stars over your head that captivate the crew's imagination. Oh no! Below deck, superstitions take root like barnacles on a hull. While the sails sway overhead, someone mentions the full moon's effect, and suddenly you're all in on the commotion. Every full moon promises madness. Madness. You can almost hear mysterious whispers of the moon is watching, while simultaneously raising a mug, much like a sailor raising his hopes, right before drowning them again in nothing but beer. Ah, nothing says we're definitely getting home, like believing the moon can cause more than just high tides. Now let's not skip past the rituals that unfold nightly. To keep the stars in good favour, A ceremonial song is sung, but only for the good luck constellation, a patron saint of wayward sailors known in crew lore as Sirius the Searcher. Sailors quote the ancient text of yore. Dance beneath the evening skies, grant us fortune in disguise. Silly? Perhaps. But who wouldn't want to sway and shimmy with the night's secrets? Somewhere far away, a sea turtle rolls its eyes at the folly, while sipping seawater and munching on seaweed like a nonchalant elder tuned out of high seas drama. As you bask in these celestial debates, a rogue star flickers overhead, mischievously twinkling like a jester, and you quickly eye old Jack's navigating compass, as if it's just clued you in on a secret loss of direction. Drunk thoughts lead to drunk paths, you think, cautiously reaching for the nearest piece of salted meat for a clear head. Uncertainty is the last thing needed when you're 1,000 nautical miles from the nearest toilet. Meanwhile, the steely-eyed captain, who truly believes himself a descendant of the most illustrious stars, squints at the constellation chart and demands adherence. Anyone caught idly staring at the beautiful constellations without a care for their duties may find themselves swabbing the deck barefoot during a new moon. The captain's vindication over stellar events leads to superstitions becoming the real rulers of the night, leaving you amused yet bewildered. Is it really the stars guiding you? Or are they laughing behind those shimmering auras at the absurdity of your human ways? As the night gives way to the vibrant hues of dawn, you learn that superstition may very well be the very heart of every ocean journey. Each sail, each star, each heartfelt serenade to Sirius is another thread woven into the fabric of the sailor's existence. Before you know it, you'll be joining them, trading dubious wisdom and signing balmy odes dedicated to the cosmos. Let the stars guide you along this wild sea adventure. So wash down that last pull of ale, embrace your skepticism, and remember, sometimes it's just as important to believe in the absurd as it is to navigate with discipline. The seas are as much about courage as they are about constellations, and sometimes the guidance you need will come from the same stars that twinkle down upon you from a distance. Who knows? They might just want to bring you safely home, if only to savour the irony of your journey back on shore where warmer beds and pastries await. You thought it was just a meal. It turns out it was also a sacrificial offering. The crew is convinced that a chicken or two will ensure smooth sailing and calm seas. Why? Because every sailor knows that if the chickens squawk enough, land must be near, or catastrophe is about to strike, which is just fine. Bring on the poultry. You find yourself eyeing the chickens as if they could reveal the secrets of the universe. Picture this: a bustling galley on an overly crowded ship, a gaggle of sailors clacking their mugs together in a raucous toast, and there, centred upon the table, sits a plump chicken, looking less than thrilled about its fate. You can't help but wonder, how did it come to this? Are they sacrificing a bird to please whatever deity is steering this crazy ship, or is it just part of the daily nautical circus? The captain, with his weathered visage, proclaims that this isn't just a meal. It's a benevolent exchange with the sea gods. Ah, yes, the infamous sea gods, forgotten cousins to the deities of stability and prosperity. They're known for throwing tantrums and drenching sailors without a hint of exasperation. Was the last storm triggered by an ill-timed curse on a Wednesday? Best not to find out. As everyone gathers in prayer, you can almost hear the chicken whispering, "I'm no hero!" Yet one of the more superstitious sailors argues that if the chicken squawks loudly before it meets its fate, it's a good omen, a sign that the sea will treat you kindly. This turns dinner from a simple meal into a tension-filled event. You glance at the birds, those frazzled bundles of feathers, and think, if only you were aware of how fate rests entirely in your flapping wings. Then comes the climactic moment. The chicken is raised high, a gory tableau painting itself against the backdrop of the setting sun, uncaring of the dinner-time drama unfolding before it. All bets are on which end of the ship will hold the next stormy outburst. Should the chicken squawk? Or should everyone just pray for calm, which, as every sailor knows, often gets the opposite reaction from the universe? The mantra goes, "Squawk for luck, but don't jinx us." And sure enough, after the ritual sacrifice, as the fiery sun sinks into the horizon, the crew gathers for the moment of truth. Has the chicken appeased the gods? With bated breath, sailors begin to debate whether it was enough, a perfect meal, or a potentially regrettable invocation of the ocean's wrath. Everyone rushes to the bow of the ship like it's Black Friday and glares out across the waves. Surely an ominous swell doesn't count if the chicken was tasty, right? Days flash by. Whatever green land you set sail for continues eluding you as storms brew overhead, sending waves crashing against the galleon like angry surfboards. Your minds drift to the last meal. How close were you to tasting smooth sailing or fate? With each passing day, whispers suggest that perhaps it should have been a goat instead, because clearly the sea gods aren't feeling chicken today. You nod along, wondering if it's too late to trade a floating pound of butter for more noble offerings. As night descends, the sea does what it loves best. Massive crashing waves, thunderclaps, and intermittent lightning flash through the dark, presenting a horror show of a maritime opera. You wonder how much wisdom a clucking ensemble could have imparted on board instead. The squawking of the blessed chicken, after all, worked wonders until it turned into delicious stew lacking meaty charm. But hey, is superstition really so foolish when it could potentially save the lives of a band of ruffians adrift in the Bermuda Triangle? Maybe, just maybe, the next offering, be it a chicken or something wilder, will mean smoother waters, and more importantly, a far better feast. Just make sure everyone is careful with the black pepper. Ancient sea fables warn against mixing spices with fate. So here you are pondering, what will be the next charming creature summoned to the galley? Will it be a goat, an unsuspecting rabbit, or a fisherman's broken dreams? Seafarers thrive on folklore and whimsy, and let's face it, every chicken has its day, even if it ends in a pot. You're ambling along the beach, and here come the webbed crabs. While searching for dinner, the crew can't help but wax poetic about how these crustaceans can forecast the weather and fortune. Instead of catching dinner, they meekly catch their fates. Welcome, friends. Dinner might just scuttle away beneath your fumbling toes. Now, let's pause for a second here. Have you ever tried negotiating with a crab? It's like engaging in a dance-off with an angry toddler. The crab scuttles sideways, pinching the air as if demanding your immediate respect, or perhaps your last piece of bread. The crew swears that if you catch one of these crusty creatures, it guarantees smooth sailing ahead. But let's be real, that's more likely just your average fisherman's tall tale coursing through the salty breeze. As you crouch down in a fit of excitement, you might even hear old Sal muttering about the meaning of each crab type, as if he's a crustacean whisperer. The hermit crabs, he claims, come bearing messages from the sea goddess. "A sign of home," he exclaims, contrasting the yellowish object you see as a mere shell. You try not to roll your eyes, considering that, if you took him seriously, you might just start wearing a hat made of shells. Pirate fashion at its finest. Charging onward, you might stumble across a group of sailors who have taken the crab gathering far too seriously. They've fashioned an impromptu competition about who can catch the largest one, which swiftly devolves into comedy gold. As one sailor brags about catching a crab the size of his head, which is good, considering that's relatively small, another insists he saw one so large it could carry him off into the sunset. Clearly, egos and sea life are not easily tamed. Meanwhile, one enthusiastic deckhand is convinced that the key to bountiful fortune lies in naming each crab before it gets released, and boy does he take this to heart. Here we have George, and here's Susan, and a magnificent example. Let's call him Clawsome. The crew crowds around, laughing and groaning, tuning out the impending reality of an unsatisfying fish stew. The naming ceremony drags on at the same rate a crab walks, and you can't help but wonder if the crabs can feel the pressure. And just when you thought this crab catch wasn't going anywhere, things take a delightful turn. Someone slips on the wet sand and lands right in the middle of the little crab colony. The crabs go flying in all directions like a freaky game of beach volleyball. Every sailor bursts into laughter, a scene so chaotic yet comically magnificent that you can't resist the thought, well, at least we'll have to rethink dinner options. Finally, once the excitement has settled and the moon casts a silvery glow over the beach, the crew gathers to share stories from legendary ocean voyages and the infamous kitchen crab. Apparently, there was one unfortunate sailor who tried to befriend a particularly feisty crab in hopes of some kitchen magic. Instead, the crab pinched him fiercely enough to ensure he never stepped foot on the galley again, forever dubbed the kitchen crab curse. Honestly, at this point, whether a crab brings fortune or misfortune is entirely subjective, much like a dreary Tuesday. As the sun sets on your beach adventure and the satisfying squawking of seagulls fills the air, it's easy to see why sailors have held such symbolic reverence for their crustacean friends. They may squabble over crabs on the beach, but they're also keenly aware of the connection between sea creatures and the unpredictable whims of fate. With your newfound insight, you join the crew in an exuberant cheer for the next crab that scuttles past. Together, dreaming of calmer tides, fatter fish, and perhaps a sailor's sardonic sense of destiny, one pinch at a time. After all, if anything has become clear, it's that it's not just about the catch. It's about the stories, the laughter, and the camaraderie spent down by the restless shore. And who knows? Perhaps tomorrow's fishing could conjure up a legendary tale or two of misfortune that ends in a triumphant crustacean ballad. You think you're alone on board, but every corner of the ship is haunted with whispers of ghostly sailors who refuse to leave their soft spots of the sea. Did you bring them bad luck with your chatter, or are they merely welcoming a new generation of fools? You could sure use fewer ghosts and more crew, but history isn't prepared to let you escape easily. As the moon casts its silvery glow on the deck, you can almost hear the laughter and cries of sailors long gone. Just the other day, you swore a bald, bearded figure offered you advice on how to tie a proper knot. Turns out old Salty Jim didn't have a tongue to wag. That's because he's been resting in peace since the Spanish Armada. Every creak of wood and whistle of the wind is there to remind you, no one really leaves the sea. But what's the deal with these nautical phantoms? It's like they have a lifetime membership to the Cruising Afterlife Club. Sailors of yore believed that the ghosts of those who perished in storms or battles were bound to their vessels, endlessly roaming the decks in search of lost treasures, or perhaps just an open bar. Imagine the confusion. Some drunken sailor from the 17th century is now watching you, wondering why you're so focused on scrolling through papers instead of polishing the brass. But aren't we all just a bit rusty on the truths about the ocean? Now, if you're sailing on a particularly ancient ship with a history richer than your Aunt Betty's fruitcake, consider yourself warned. These ghostly guardians are not here to provide tea and crumpets. With each gust of wind sending a shiver down your spine, you'd think the sight of your own shadow was your buddy from days past. Just wait until you wake up to the sight of a phantom cat with an attitude, glaring at you like you've just drunkenly tangoed with its long-lost owner. What would you even say? Sorry, can I borrow some kibble? Oh, the horrors. In the spirit of these nautical shenanigans, superstition climaxes at the latest sea ghost trend. Never ever talk about land while on a boat. The old adage goes, if you mention land, your ship will never reach it. If that were true, half the crew would be flotsam and jetsam headed straight for Davy Jones's locker. Yet, some clumsy steps are still being taken to ward off these ill tidings. A piece of bread is thrown overboard as an offering to calm the ghostly ruckus every time someone accidentally says the L word. Talk about a throwback to our childhood days of tossing pennies into wishing wells. Are you wishing for smooth sailing, or just trying to bribe the spirits? Who knows? Maybe the spirits will take your offerings and trade them for your life. You're probably thinking, this is ridiculous, and you're right. It is. But guess who's stuck on a haunted ship pacing the deck thinking about ghosts in the moonlight? It's you. Let's step a bit further into the phantoms of the past. Some sailors believed it was exactly the souls of the fallen that shaped weather patterns. Couldn't sail for weeks, they'd tell you, because old man McGee didn't get his proper burial. It's a bit unfair considering that McGee was probably only cursed with a nasty rash from eating the wrong fish. And here you are poring over ancient maritime maps, hoping to outsmart McGee's hauntings, while the onboard cabin boy is petting what he thinks is a mythical sea creature, but it's just an old hat floating around. As you're pacing the deck looking for advice from fellow crew members, oh wait, there is no one else aboard, remember to keep your wits about you. If a singing sailor suddenly appears on deck, it's not an invitation to join a haunting jam session. It's actually a signal of incoming storms or dreadful curses. A sad song from the beyond means bad business ahead. You need to tighten your face, polish your charm, and pray you make it to the next port before having to visit with old Salty. So there you are, stuck aboard a floating haunted house, trapped between cracks and creeks, haunted yet oddly delightful in its insanity. As sunlight begins to peek over the horizon, you realise your ghost buddies might not be quite so bad after all. Sure, they could trip you up, but at least they have great stories, ironically better than the ones you'll share back home. Just don't tell them you've run out of rum, or they may show you what true haunting feels like. Now breathe easy, find your borrowed parrot, and head safely into another day at sea, filled with mystery, mischief, and more than a few giggles at the expense of those who sailed before you. With the sails flapping in the wind, every sailor believes they're in the presence of the divine if a breeze kicks in. But there's a catch. Not all winds are friendly. As you drift into the clutches of Mother Nature, anticipate the realization that even the zephyrs have their opinions on who's navigating the ship. In the midst of this blusterous ballet, you find yourself wondering whether the playful gusts harbour intentions or are merely gleeful tormentors. These winds have a sense of humour, and on this galleon, it might just mean laughter or calamity. As you stand on the deck, you can hear the wind whispering secrets, boasting about its ability to turn a smooth sail into chaos in a heartbeat. 1 second, you're gliding across the water like a swan, and the next, it feels like you're on a roller coaster designed by a drunken engineer. The ship's timbers creak and groan under the strain, making you question if you're navigating a vessel or a shaky carnival ride. Is that laughter erupting from the gusts, or are they simply mocking the crew's futile attempts to wrestle with the sails? If you tuned into the right frequency, you might just catch them exchanging tales of the unfortunate souls who dared curse the wind. The crew is already on edge, glancing at the swirling clouds above as if they can negotiate some sort of truce. Sailors believe it's all in the hands of Poseidon, or perhaps some other stormy deity with artistic temperament. You sit down to hear a tale that's both whimsical and terrifying. Never forget, mates, that wind can swoosh us neatly to shore, or toss us overboard faster than you can say, "Open sea." As one grizzled old sailor recounts the legend of Captain Terrible Ted, who underestimated the wind's fury, your pulse quickens. According to law, Ted boldly declared he could outrun any storm, only to discover that the winds had taken it personally. Now, his ship is said to wander aimlessly, crewed by salty ghosts and cursed to never escape, like some lingering maritime reality show. A soft breeze rustles through your hair, and you can't help but lift your arms. Perhaps you think, if you wave them like an excited bird, the wind might decide you're a worthy vessel. But no such luck. They're fickle, those zephyrs, and they seem to favour the idea of chaos over charm. It's like they've gathered together during their breaks, giggling at us mortals trying to row against their whims. Amid the tumult, your fellow sailors argue over the correct way to harness winds, as if consulting an ancient book of secrets written by the wind itself. Port or starboard, one screeches while struggling with the ropes. No, no, that's if you want to sail into a headache. The knots become a dance as they leap back and forth, desperate for the wind's approval that doesn't seem to be forthcoming. Perhaps these mariners just can't keep up with the wind's expectations, which seem to fluctuate more than the tides. You realise the wind is utterly indifferent to their struggles, like that one relative who shows up to Thanksgiving dinner and refuses to pick a side. You step back and ponder for a moment. Is this what life looks like out here? A constant struggle against forces beyond control? Suddenly, a gust captures the ship's mainsail, the canvas billowing outward like a balloon at a child's birthday party, threatening to take the whole crew to the next dimension. The resulting wave rolls like a full-grown bull, sending everyone stumbling toward the rail. Smothered laughter erupts as one sailor ends up on his backside, pretending to be deeply enamoured with the deck planks. It appears even the wind enjoys the occasional spectacle. But fear not. This is not merely slapstick. There's a lesson hidden within the buffeting chaos. Each sailor gradually learns their place not just aboard the ship, but also in this wild, wind-tossed theatre where life unfolds like a tragedy with comic relief. The wind could be that steadfast force you must learn to understand and respect. The winds can help propel you towards your destination, or turn a joyous journey into a brush with calamity. You can't help but think, are you ready to earn the Zephyr's respect? As you catch your breath and regain your footing, you realise it's not just about the destination. The journey itself holds its own weight, laughter, and merit. So brace yourself for the whims of wind, and when the sails catch that perfect breeze again, celebrate each flutter with gratitude, for today's chaos could lead to tomorrow's adventure. Wait, what's that in the deep? You hear tales of sea monsters lurking beneath, some sailors believing in aqua beasts that would swallow ships whole. Whether or not to heed the warnings about whatever may be lurking under the murky waters is a matter of personal experience and real-life adventure, or an honoured drunken bet. As you stand on the deck, squinting at the waves, your imagination runs wild. Will a kraken grab the ship and drag it into the abyss? Or is it just last night's gruel swirling in your stomach, insisting it's 100-foot squid ready to eat you for breakfast? Now let's talk about your fellow shipmates, who are about as enthusiastic as a toddler with a mouthful of cold porridge. With every passing hour, they've swapped stories about leviathans, sea serpents, and mermaids, because what's better than paranoia while crossing an uncharted ocean? Gazing out into the deep blue, you can't help but picture huge tentacles rising from below, flinging ships aside like toys, or, perhaps at worst, your breakfast too, if it surfaces for air. You wonder if it's worth the risk of sharing our ship with these so-called monsters, or the deep-seated fear that they could simply be believable theories founded in nothing more than panic and boredom. Every seasoned sailor has a tale, Benny claims he saw a giant squid devouring the last ship he served on, though you suspect it's just because his cooking was so bad that something had to give. I swear it was this big, he says, gesturing with arms as wide as they can go, while squinting like he's just remembered to pay his bar tab after a particularly rough shore leave. And old Marge? She tells of a sea serpent that wrapped itself around the hull, threatening to take them down with one twist of its shimmering scales. By the end of her account, you can almost smell the fish burning down below as she launches the crew into a dramatic retelling. But be careful, my friend, because as you watch the tiny waves lapping against the side of the ship, a decision looms large. Do you believe your comrades, especially when they're holding another round of rum and laughing at the idea of mythical creatures swimming about? Or do you cling to that whisper of skepticism that tells you these creatures are just the product of an overactive imagination fed by too much salt and too little sleep? But whether they're real or not, the thought of these underwater beasts creates an excitement that ripples through the air like the sweet notes of the sea shanty wafting from below deck. After all, there's something strangely thrilling about sharing a space with potential monsters. Perhaps it's the tug of adventure, or the innate urge to ward off fear through camaraderie. Or maybe it's just the thrill of not losing one's last silver coin to a gambling den. As the sun dips lower in the sky and paints the ocean with hues of gold and crimson, your thoughts drift to the poor souls who have dared to tread too close to the edge of the unknown, claiming they've seen the fabled beasts. Lost ships, lonely cries in the night, and the unrelenting pull of the sea on a weary soul. Could this truly be the fate awaiting you? Should you run to the galley or dust off an old harpoon? Spoiler, neither option sounds appealing right now, especially given that both the food and your seamanship could use a little help. Night falls, and with it, the stories grow darker. Eyes turn wide as you catch the reflection of the moon on the water, each shimmer resembling the sharp teeth of a lurking leviathan waiting to claim its next meal. And there you are, clutching your drink, listening to ghost stories, fully aware that perhaps what remains unseen is indeed more fearsome than what can be seen. Between shivers and scoffs, a tension hangs in the air, one that clings to your clothes like the salt in your hair. So, whether these monstrous tales have any basis in reality, or are merely a concoction of too much drink and too little reason, they serve one vital purpose. They keep the spirit of adventure alive. Navigating the great unknown may feel like you're sleeping with one eye open as you contemplate the threat of the mythical deep, and whether you're daring enough to face whatever waves or monsters may arise next. After all, it's no fun sailing in calm waters when life's grand adventure lurks just beneath the surface, waiting for silly sailors like you to throw caution to the wind, or perhaps overboard in sheer excitement. Someone found a stash of buried pirate gold, and suddenly you're standing in the ruins of a moral quandary, listening to tales of ill-fated treasure seekers. Surely fortune is great, but have you considered the ancient curses wrapped around it? Welcome aboard, disaster. You'll make bank or it'll make a meal out of you. Ah, the tantalizing lure of gold. It sparkles, it glimmers, and it weighs enough to set off alarm bells in the conscience of any sailor. But deep in the minds of those aboard, whispers echo tales of the cursed gold of long-dead buccaneers who buried their haul with as much greed as malice. So picture yourself in the midst of a heated argument. Should you ransom the skeletons for their loot or flee the superstition? The seas are full of legends, particularly concerning gold that's come at the cost of unholy deals and bloodshed. Just think back to the story of the infamous captain who buried his treasure with a severed limb of the crew that tried to escape. Legend has it that each piece of that gold comes shackled with curses powerful enough to sink ships. You check your pockets, filled only with pebbles, and shudder. Can a handful of ill-gotten gains be worth the risk of sleeping with one eye open? Not only will the ghosts of dead sailors be haunting you, but there's the grim truth about pirate curses. Often, there's no rhyme or reason to the paranormal payback. The crew begins a small meeting huddled together beneath the weathered sails, deciding whether they'll dare to heed the alleged horrors of every shimmer from the ground. As you listen in, the talk turns to superstition, the illicit trade, the terrible fates of the cursed, and the inevitable doom that befalls anyone who even thinks about digging up that shiny hoard. Of course, these tales aren't just concoctions of lunatics singing shanties about mermaids and buried treasure. No, sir, they're the stuff of ripped-out pages from nautical history. Take, for instance, the notorious Flying Dutchman, doomed to forever roam the waters, creaking and howling lost in the fog. That ghost ship is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. That golden chalice isn't merely gold. It carries weight. If you dare take it, most believe a string of nightmarish fates will follow you right to the gallows. The other sailors are already lost in banter. One swears he knows how to lift a curse by wearing a parrot's feather, while another insists that only a bottle of rum called cursed gold can break the spell. Makes sense, right? Get drunk. Dig deep. And if things go sideways, at least you won't remember anything. The crew moves forward to espouse the wonders of alcohol-induced fantasy. Meanwhile, a chill runs down your spine at the thought of the crew being tortured, hung, or worse, forced into unending chaos by the evil spirits demanding payment for their promised fortune. It's like bringing home leftovers from an infamous restaurant and realizing you've invited a side of death along with your meal. Once you get to the digging site, you can practically feel these ghostly eyes boring into your back, watching every move you make. Each golden coin you unearth sparks arguments among the crew about whether to cover it back up or march forth like drunken fools into a terrifying fate. That's when the first mishap happens. The ship starts to creak ominously. A few riggings sway in protest as if the spirits of long-gone sailors are on your tail. Or maybe it's just the gin talking. Either way, panic settles in, debating whether the gold is real or whether it's just an illusion twisted by the shadows. Finally, with hearts racing, one brave soul snatches a handful of the treasure and thrusts it into a satchel. The commitment to gold, even as it brings laughter laced with fear, turns heads and makes for an evening of revelry. Down go the drinks, and away goes the warning voice in the background. Yet in the silence following, you can still feel the weight of that pirate gold resting uneasily, waiting for its moment to claim its dues. And there you are, tucked deep in the heart of swirling legends, an unwitting player in a tale spun with ambition, greed, and the undeniable dark charm of the sea. Will you manage to sleep soundly tonight? Or will the whispers of cursed gold sow unrest in your dreams? Your betting odds seem as uncertain as the next swell of the horizon. Indeed, as the darkness envelops the ship, you might be holding on to coins or ghosts in your sleep, praying they'll never come calling again. A new party trick, or just exactly what not to bring aboard? Dispel the notion of shark fin soup as sailors passionately debate the morality of hunting sharks. Do you bring the wrath of the ocean upon yourselves, or should you just eat the salted fish like everyone else? Choices, choices. One thing's for sure, you can bet on a lively discussion breaking out in the galley when someone suggests whipping up a decadent bowl of shark fin soup. Lean closer, and you'll hear a chorus of opinions bouncing around the room as rapidly as a seagull snatching a chip from a distracted deckhand. Imagine the scenario. A bunch of burly sailors sitting around, strings of seaweed all over their beards, discussing the ethical implications of their next meal like it's a symposium at Oxford. "Just think about it, mate," one sailor declares, gesturing emphatically with a piece of hardtack that may or may not have started life as a hunk of driftwood. "What if we summoned Sharkzilla with our shenanigans?" Another sailor, more sceptical, chimes in, Or what happens if we don't eat because of your nonsense? Who's going to risk life and limb to catch that salted fish? You'd best keep your stomach in check, my friend. As they squabble and bicker, you can almost hear an ancient prophecy echoing over the crests of the waves. Why? Because let's face it, sailor logic is both terrifying and simultaneously ridiculous. Did some fin-flapping creature really swim up to the deck and curse them all with bad luck for generations just because their stewpot got a little too adventurous? After all, you know things have gone terribly wrong when the intervention of a sea witch seems like a viable option over a seafood supper. But it doesn't end there. Dare you insult the ocean by serving shark fin soup on your ship? It might provoke the embodiment of Poseidon himself to rise from beneath the waves, fist raised, demanding tributes of a different kind, perhaps in the form of the ship's entire dinner supply. The rumours spread like wildfire among the crew as they consider implications far beyond the simple act of cooking. Who knew that a mere suggestion about a recipe could summon the sea's darkest forces? The dicey ocean debate continues, with some claiming it's all merely an old wives' tale wrapped in fancy napkin lore. In the midst of all the tempestuous thinking, there's that one foolhardy fellow who does decide to try it anyway, driven by nothing more than sheer pirate bravado. With that first slurp of shark fin soup, the crew watches with bated breath, half expecting the heavens to rumble or seaweed to come alive and cause a ruckus. But instead they hear nothing. No crashing waves, no sudden squalls, just the sound of a satisfied sailor licking his bowl clean, with the rest of the crew gawking at him like he's just suggested perfecting the pirate waltz on deck. Hours later, they'll find him wandering aimlessly by the railings, proclaiming he's heard the siren singing a rather catchy tune about being finned for a fortune. Who knows? Maybe shark fin soup really does unlock otherworldly insights. Insights that suggest the best way to lure fish is through interpretive dance. Of course, amidst the raucous laughter, you're left trying to decipher whether anyone is actually capable of perpetrating such madness. As the discussion rumbles on about finning this and finning that, you secretly wonder if there's a better meal option out there, one that doesn't leave you contemplating the depths of maritime morality while trying to figure out which fish won the Great Ocean Popularity Contest. Perhaps all they really need is the comforting embrace of a sturdy hunk of salted fish, seasoned lightly with a sprinkle of fate and foresight. In the end, the extraordinarily thin line between culinary adventure and cosmic catastrophe continues to unravel. Whether the ship devours shark fin soup or contemplates the virtues of seafood ethics, one can be certain of this. When it comes to sailors' fare, nobody ever emerges unscathed. At least not without a wild tale of maritime superstition to tell. Because in the gallant chaos of ocean life sometimes, the greatest treasure isn't gold, but a hearty laugh shared among men, bound by the madness of the sea and their wild imaginations. Playing catch with the moon as a compass. Welcome to midnight madness on board. As you sail by the light of the lunar glow, those on deck will boldly claim they can pinpoint ports based on moon phases. If that sounds unbelievable, congratulations, this isn't your average GPS. The sailors, immersed in their own brand of nautical genius, swear up and down that the moon can guide them home as surely as a lighthouse, provided they remember which way is home, of course. Imagine this peculiar scene. A motley crew of bearded men squinting into the abyss, tossing back rum like it's a life-saving elixir, which, let's be honest, could actually be the truth. One sailor, Oliver the Eloquent, or just Oliver, stands up and points dramatically at the ethereal glow of the full moon. He declares, "By the bright eye of Selene, we'll reach land by dawn." Meanwhile, the rest of the crew eye him suspiciously, mentally tallying up their rations to see if they can afford to go ashore again. As your ship gently sways, You hear talk of moon tides, that sneaky phenomenon that can either raise your ship to glory or capsize it entirely. Of course, no sailor can remember which wins out when the stakes are high, and don't even get me started if someone mentions the influence of Lady Moon while mixing up their ports. At this rate, you're half convinced these guys know even less about celestial navigation than a landlubber trying to find his way with a paper map and a broken compass. But here's the kicker. There's some logic buried beneath the layers of superstition. You see, sailors took note of the moon's cycle and its effect on tides. Almost instinctively, they knew that a full moon usually meant stronger tides, which when partnered with an eager wind could either support a swift voyage or take you straight to Davy Jones's locker. Mostly the latter if you listened closely to Oliver. As you spot the stars twinkling like a bunch of giddy children, the crew starts arguing about constellations. Classic faces in the sky that are sometimes mistaken for internal compass points, or just drunken hallucinations, who can say? "No, Bill, that's not Orion. That's just a lost piece of smoked fish," one of them barks, prompting laughter. As the boat creaks and groans, it's clear this band of merry men is far more invested in drinking rituals than in celestial charts. Each of them has a different view, like a poorly arranged jigsaw puzzle. Nobody's quite sure how to put all these pieces together, and you get the sense no one really wants to try. Not to mention the whispers of mermaids luring them with gentle moonlight. They're just distractions. But you can't help but think that Oliver would be the first to plummet overboard with a drunken proclamation that the ocean has spoken. You hope the moon's not the last thing you see, although given that it spreads its shimmering glow only to serve a cocktail of comfort and chaos, it might just be. Suddenly a wave knocks your ship sideways, sending mugs and unsteady sailors tumbling like skittles. It's hard to tell whether it's the sea's fury or a collective case of poor navigation, but as the crew regains their footing and heads back to their posts, despite some sharp complaints about the lack of smooth sailing, Oliver shouts, "Hold fast, there's treasure in the moonlight!" Yet, you can't help but think that too many drinks and too little guidance might lead to a different kind of treasure. A shipwreck tale worthy of both shock and laughter over the next round of ale. As the ship continues its course, you cannot help but marvel at the life and death stakes all wrapped up in their absurd rituals. Setting course by the moon is part science and part madness. Crafty legends stitched together to evoke courage, camaraderie, and maybe a little bit of relief from the monotony of seafaring life. So, as you struggle to fight off the inevitable nausea, you let yourself drift into the feeling, the collective lunacy of fellow sailors who sailed under the moonlight, with spirits as buoyant as their tipsy imaginations. And just like that, as the silver orb sails higher into the ink-blue sky, you find yourself wishing you'd packed a telescope to join their metaphysical navigation scheme. After all, someone has to keep us on course, right? Whether it's tides or tall tales or the hope that the moon might enable some luck, you settle in for the ride, knowing that on a ship like this, you'll have no choice but to feel the currents of both the sea and the shipmates' colourful tales of daring and danger. All hands are on deck, and the firelight flickers as sailors chant surreptitiously about keeping the flames alive as a symbol of life and fortune. But will it lead to prosperity, or an impromptu dance with a ghost? Time to find out, because flames can definitely get a bit out of hand on the high seas. As the colours of the fire glow against the weathered wooden hull, every sailor knows that extinguishing the fire is tantamount to inviting calamity, like handing your ship over to Neptune himself as a tribute. And let's be real, no one wants a watery grave because some fool couldn't keep the fire alive. You settle onto a makeshift bench, trying not to breathe in the cloying scent of burnt fish stew wafting from an earlier misadventure in the galley. The deck is a curious charcuterie of mismanaged meals and dubious charms. You've got rotten potatoes sitting dangerously close to the flames, and a heap of rum bottles that collectively have seen more action than a belly dancer at a wedding. They chatter about the flames like they're enchanted. Every flicker is a message from the divine. Great insurance for your sanity, really, when you consider you're living in a floating tin can beset by the whims of the ocean. "Don't let it die! Feed the flames!" a burly sailor bellows, throwing another log onto the fire like he's offering up livestock to a goddess. As the flames leap higher, you can practically see the glow illuminating the day's disasters. Deckhands shivering in their wet tunics, a cabin boy fumbling with the anchor's chain while a seagull pecks at his exposed shoelace. It's chaotic and frankly unglamorous. You can't help but wonder, who exactly thought this was a good idea? In fact, many believe that the fire represents the heartbeat of the ship, coursing through the timbers like the blood in your veins. You realise, in a rather self-reflective moment, that it's more than that. That flickering flame is all that stands between you, the deck, and the relentless waves. When men are adrift at sea, thoughts can lean toward the dark side, casting shadows longer than an oversized pirate's moustache. But as long as a sailor's got his fire, hope isn't just a mirage drifting over the horizon. It's the warm's glow reassuring you that tomorrow might not just feature a duel against a giant squid. And just then, as if the universe itself is playing tricks on you, an unexpected gust of wind snuffs out the flames momentarily. A collective gasp echoes through the crew, a sound almost as profound as when you realise your last biscuit has vanished. You scramble in a mild panic to restart it, wondering if perhaps the ship's resident ghost is throwing shade your way. Whispered curses fill the air, as much a hazard as any sharp rocks below. "Quick, someone fetch the rum!" another sailor shouts. Half a laugh, half a prayer. Rum. It's the magic potion that could resurrect a flame, or an entire evening's worth of merriment. You. Think of those dancing flames and how they pull every hand into the fold, creating patterns that flicker like mermaid tails at the edge of the sea. Perhaps there's wisdom hidden amongst those flames, guiding men through storm and struggle, or simply telling the desperate to keep tossing taffy at storm clouds. As the fire begins to rise again, you can practically see the spirits cheer. The lively buzz among the crew picks up, stools are repositioned, and chairs are ingested like long-lost friends. Superstitions float like smoke around you, and each sailor begins speaking of the dead whose souls may haunt these waters. Misery loves company after all. The spirits lurking nearby want to join the raucous laughter. Boisterous claims of a ghost who once lost a duel to a possessed parrot bounce off the ship's sides. No noise, no shanty too absurd to share when the flames dance. But a moment's slip into melancholy reveals itself. Someone recalls the last sailor who let the fire dwindle. He vanished in a storm, swept off this mortal coil, leaving behind only a tattered hat. So, here's to the fire. It sparks conversations deep into the night, divining answers sourced from the flickering tongues of flame. You can't help but feel your heart swell. There's something undeniably human about this chaos. Tonight, you're no longer just a lonely vessel bobbing in the vast sea, but part of a family united against the odds, boosted by laughter, mystery, and a bit of madness, all ignited by a fiddling flame. As the shadows grow long, with laughter and storytelling enveloping your spirit like a warm cloak, you realise that even amidst uncertainty, your adventure is a blend of intensity and absurdity. And in this world of superstitions, one thing is certain: keep feeding the fire, and perhaps it will illuminate the treasure of camaraderie, humour and life aboard the wild blue sea. You've got bouncy locks and a seaweed charm that suggests mermaids have graced the ship. Mix that with prayers for luck, and you've got a charming combination, until the winds change and you're left wondering if you'd prefer salt or seaweed in your stew. Ah, mermaids, Those enchanting sea sirens who could lure even the most hardened sailor into a watery grave with a mere flick of their tails and a sultry song. But before you get too swept away by fantasy, it's time to delve into the absurdity of how sailors believed that the charming hair of a mermaid could twist fate and weather woes on the high seas. Imagine standing on the ship's deck, glancing out at the endless horizon, feeling that lovely breeze on your face, and suddenly you hear it. The haunting melody of a mermaid calling your name. Whether the song was real, or just the side effects of consuming questionable rations from yesterday's supply pile doesn't matter. For sailors, the legend of mermaids was a crackling fire of superstition, lighting up every nook and cranny of shipboard discussions. They firmly believed that mermaids had a penchant for collecting treasures, but were also keen on harvesting hair, specifically the hair of sailors that could be woven into charms for their own protection. When the crew would toss strands of their own hair into the sea, they would murmur a prayer to encourage a dolphin or two to accompany them. But it's not just the hair. Oh no. There were tales of entire ships going missing because someone dared to disrespect a mermaid. You would think that dropping a spoon overboard would be the last of your worries, but if a ship's cook stirred the pot while singing a sea shanty, the crew would often gasp in horror, believing they'd summoned a mermaid's wrath, and a hell of a rainstorm was coming. So, just be aware, next time you hear someone crooning about plunder and promise on deck, it's more than just some nautical jingle. It might just sink the ship. The mermaid lore didn't stop there. Tales of bad luck were woven into the daily lives of sailors. A common superstition held that spotting a mermaid was a bad omen. Fishermen would trade their gin for a ticket of good fortune rather than risk running into one. After all, who could resist the allure of radiant sirens luring your crew into the waves? Yet, once caught in their gaze, it was no longer just about whether or not your biological health would hold up against a scratchy sail or bad fish stew. Oh no, it was your soul at stake, and the dilemma of whether or not you'd haul in the day's catch morphed into a matter of life and death, all perched on the edge of oceanic seduction. To make matters worse, the belief that mermaids would take your hair and weave it into nets to ensnare unsuspecting sailors became particularly prevalent after one too many wild nights of rum and hallucinations. A little seaweed to charm the ocean wasn't going to hurt, your comrades reasoned, but will it be enough? Without proper charms for reward, ship's crews were known to forage for seaweed, much to their dismay. The only thing they caught were glances of disbelief from the other sailors, and if the joke wasn't already on them, think of it this way. Many sailors took this superstition so seriously, they would have ceremonies to conduct hair offerings, standing around in the moonlight as if it were the most sacred rite of the land. Picture a group of burly dudes mumbling under their breath near the bow of the ship, tossing hair shavings into the sea while the hungry tides looked on. Surely the mermaids watched and thought, do they know how ridiculous they look? How much of our treasure could we lift with such a lure? And just when you thought the ceremony was over, a humorously ill-timed gust of wind would seamlessly ruin the moment, sending hats and cursed hair into the yellow sea. So, next time you find yourself tossing a lock or two into the briny deep, you might want to think twice. Because while the belief in mermaids and their enchanting hair might seem charming and delightful, the reality was likely more salty and tangled than most sailors cared to admit. In conclusion, whether mermaids are swimming just beyond the current or you're freelancing some seaweed superstitions, one thing is for sure, there's no shortage of humour in the high seas, and who knows, maybe, just maybe, the next wave might bring a smiling mermaid or a shipwrecked treasure hunter. Whatever it is, life on sea continues, buoyed by the endless tales and superstitions that tantalise every seafarer. If there's ever been a time to believe in enchantresses, this is it. Sailors carrying charms to charm the winds and fates of the seas as they invoke mysterious rituals to soothe the watery depths. At some point, one of them must be thinking, did I just put the wrong spell on my coffee? Picture a motley crew of sailors, each with wildly different ideas about what their sea goddess might ask for from them in exchange for a gentle breeze. Are they really relying on a few offerings of slightly wilted seaweed and a half-eaten herring to sway her favour? At least they haven't tried sacrificing one of those crusty boots sitting in the corner, yet. As the sun dips below the horizon, these sailors gather around a flickering lantern, tossing around stories of the infamous sea witch known only as Myrmidora, who they swear can manipulate the tides with a mere flick of her wrist, or at least with a decent amount of persuasion and some unconvincing charm. She's rumoured to reside in a massive conch shell at the bottom of the ocean, surveying ships like a stern lighthouse keeper while gnawing on the last remnants of her harried meals. Honestly, it might be more superstition than strategy, but one has to appreciate the effort. The sailors examine their charms, amulets and trinkets dangling from ropes and belts, each believed to hold ancient power. Little do they know, however, that the magic is probably more about the group's collective imagination than any actual sorcery. A crew member pulls out a potato, claiming it's a sea potato, believed to bring a bountiful catch, though, frankly, it looks more like yesterday's dinner than anything mystical. Meanwhile, another sailor decides sprucing things up requires a pinch of sand from the last place they docked. If your vessel perished 3 ports ago, maybe questionable offerings aren't the way to go, eh? "All right, gather round," barks the burly captain, sloshing whiskey from his cup as he gestures wildly to the horizon. As he recounts his epic surfing tales with Myrmidora, he forgets to mention the time he mistook a dolphin for her dark and mysterious sister. Sailors chuckle nervously, hoping the merfolk don't hear this latest rendition of their captain's embarrassment. They peg their survival on Myrmidora's whims, and so the tales grow taller. Will the sea witch stew these gentlemen into a sour, sludgy broth if they scare her? Too weird to know, yet somehow too easy to imagine. And there we are. One drunken sailor offers his best sea shanty as an offering to Myrmidora. Revelling in lyrical genius he might as well have borrowed from a parrot. His comrades shake their heads, laughing at the absurdity of it all while secretly wishing for the sort of calm seas that allow tales like these to thrive. "Sing louder, matey! Shall we summon every creature in the deep?" someone yells through laughter, forcing gratitude for the comforting heavens, where they hope mermaids might be swaying by. But look out. That sea witch is not just an embodiment of benevolence. In a surprising twist of logic, sailors take to wearing odd socks, as if something about mismatched footwear will confuse Myrmidora enough not to drown them. It's rich and ridiculous, and yet, when the waves start rolling, even the most logical of men find themselves performing back-alley rituals involving inexplicably chosen wooden spoons. You can practically hear those sailor-turned wizards chant, "With this spoon, I invoke the calming sea," as if proper cutlery could loosen the grasp of fate. Eventually they'll pray fervently and toss in some salt for good luck, as if that will counterbalance the bad blessings of history. You see, the idea of witchcraft and superstitions were never just about charm bowls and toadstools. They were vessels of hope amidst uncertainty. When the winds howl and the deck shakes, a sailor's imagination can light up even the darkest of nautical nights. As the odd rituals wind down into rum-fueled laughter, there's one final blessing spoken softly into the Atlantic breeze. Sailors believe Myrmidora must be watching nearby, and they hope their mischief brings her amusement. After all, isn't the essence of surviving the endless waves about convincing yourself you're never alone? So as your friendly sea witch calms the waters with an eerie smile or an eye roll, the men finally dare to close their eyes. Her playful winds, or lack thereof, might very well dictate their fate, shaping their journey as they sail into the ever-rolling blue abyss. Each sailor's heart ponders one thing. Has their trifling with magic truly saved them, or will they awake to find themselves facing calamity? Only Myrmidora knows for sure. An anchor isn't just an anchor, it's a big old charm that promises to keep you stuck to the bottom of the ocean, all in the name of luck and safety. Will it help you weather the storm, or will you find yourself dragging deadweight across the waters? Spoiler, lucky charms and heavy anchors don't mix. For sailors in the age of exploration, an anchor held considerable weight, no pun intended, both physically and superstitiously. You see, in the eyes of these seafaring souls, the anchor isn't merely the metal object stopping their vessel from drifting into the abyss. Oh no, it's a talisman of stability in an inherently unstable world. Most mariners believed that a sound anchor could prevent storms and ensure safe passage through treacherous waters, like having a bouncer at a speakeasy, keeping the rowdy waves from crashing your party. As you lie on the deck, sipping questionable grog and listening to the old salts chant around the vessel, you start to wonder how much of this faith stems from alcohol-induced reverie, and how much is folklore backed by hard experience. One thing's for sure, the only time you should test the strength of your anchor is during a genuine hangover when everything else seems shaky. Then there are the amulets, the charms that sailors never leave port without. They'd hang around their necks or tuck them into their boots like packs of gum ready for a long voyage. Each one has its own story, but more importantly its own set of questionable logic. One particularly popular amulet was the clove of garlic, thought to repel evil spirits. In practice, after a few days at sea, it most certainly repelled fellow crew members too. Do you really want to risk bad luck by catching wind on that terrible idea? Probably not. Sailors have long had a complicated relationship with luck, and one act of fortune-telling involved tossing bits of bread into the sea. Supposedly, if the bread floated, you'd be blessed with moderate oceanic malaise. However, if it sank, goodbye crew morale. In this taut dive of superstition, every meal became a test of destiny. You can imagine sailors chasing their lunch into the ocean, trying to argue, nope, definitely wasn't the bread, it was the wind. Amidst their endless battles with luck, sailors had an elaborate etiquette regarding the invocation of their deity. Mostly because when it came upstairs to pray for safety, everyone was just trying to avoid getting whipped with the rusty chain. The captain might step into the captain's cabin to do his best prayer sorcery, while the rest of the crew muttered under their breath, praying it would be ample enough to keep them alive while sharing close quarters with fermented cabbage. Of course, what is an anchor or amulet without a good old-fashioned sea shanty? The more creative sailors often devised ballads. Anchors aweigh, anchors apeat, bring us home just before we meet. Storms may howl and waves may crash, but our anchor's strong, so hurry up, don't be rash. With a hearty round of laughter, they belt these chants long into the night, right until someone inevitably drops a barrel right on their foot. Lesson learned, any singing must cease during sharp turns. However, the height of danger often strikes when it seems calmest. Imagine the ship lulling quietly on placid waters, a sign that treachery is afoot. Some sailors believed that even the most loved amulet could only go so far. If you were seen mooring the anchor during calm conditions, you better believe your mates would raise a ruckus. What do you want, a disaster? Touch that anchor again, and we'll all end up in the belly of the whale. On top of all these charms and customs, there was one unspoken rule. Never mock the power of the sea. The oceans held tales of wrathful storms and the endless power of currents. When caught without an anchor in dire straits, superstitious sailors risk their fates betting on whether any semblance of amulet could save them. So, as you drift off into the night, dreaming of shipwrecks and smooth sailing, remember that for every anchor dragged through grey waters, there lies an amulet filled with stories of those who dared challenge the unpredictability of the sea. Who knows? Perhaps they're adding your visit to their tales now, or maybe they're just having a pint of rum and mocking the landlubbers. Ah, the evening toast turns into an evening mess of good fortune as sailors call for libations under the moonlight. Is it really just good luck, or will the next hangover come back to haunt you? As you lift your cup, you might just find trouble is brewing underneath the surface. Picture this. You're gathered around a rickety wooden table on the ship's deck, the starry sky twinkling above while the comforting smell of drunken debauchery fills the air. The crewmates around you raise their mugs high, sloshing watery ale everywhere, toasting their foolhardy luck of the seas. But amidst the revelry lies an unspoken rule. Beware the wrath of the drunken sailor's curse. As each gulp slides down your throat, the laughs and hearty claps echo around you. The jokes fly faster than the ship on a clear day, each punchline accompanied by another swig of cheap rum. You wonder aloud why your neighbour's cousin found himself face down in a barrel of fish last week. The answer is simple. Get too tipsy, and you risk invoking some ancient seafaring spirit that delights in both mischief and the misfortunes of inebriated sailors. Trust me, being found swaying while cradling a squeaky rat isn't a great way to make friends in the morning. After a few rounds, the jolly atmosphere shifts. One grizzled sailor, eyeing his half-empty mug like it's made of solid gold, declares that a strong drink is the cure for everything, even the threat of mermaids. You can't help but wonder if this is true. Does rum ward off hypnotic sea creatures? Is it that bad omens come from pureness of heart, or does heavy drinking draw them in like moths to a flame? Addressing those life questions after a half-dozen cups could be dangerous territory. As you sip your drink, the absurdities intensify. Suddenly, someone claims to have seen a spectre dancing atop the waves. It's just rum talking, you murmur, but who can say? Ghostly ships lured by the moonlight could just as easily swoop by, eager to claim their next fool. Your fellow sailor raises his mug, but instead of toasting, he's convinced he can talk to fish now. Who knew the spirit of drunkenness provided skills in ichthyology? As the night dawns deeper, the waters ripple with laughter, and you secretly wonder if phoning a fish might become a new trend for networking. Between tall tales and questionable truths, the laughter becomes louder, and the ale flows freely, drowning out thoughts of the next storm. But wait. A whistle escapes your lips, laughter stutters. Oh no! You've heard the stories. Whistling on board could summon trouble like nothing else. You can't help but think the ship is now on a fast track to becoming the next ghost story. Will the wailing winds turn into soft lullabies, or will the ship metamorphose into a giant goose, honking its dismay as it careens wildly off course? Before long the moon shines eerily, reflecting off the drunken chaos around you. It's a beautiful thing, really. Glowing sphere illuminating antics where cups overflow with risk and consequence. Just as you're about to join in a drunken jig, the mate hurls himself overboard, convinced he's found the right mermaid. Cue the panic and splashes as he emerges sputtering while demanding everyone look for his magnificent sea bride. The crew cheers, laughter blends with concern, and you wonder how diving into the water fits under the category of good luck. As the night wears on, it turns into a debacle worthy of an epic poem, full of drunken dances, ill-advised prophecies and wind gusts that seem to whisper secrets of storied sailors who never quite made it back. Will tales of drunken mischief echo long after these capsized decks? Or will they be just another evening of what happens at sea stays at sea? Yet, as the moon begins to dip, and the echoes of laughter blend with sleepy yawns, you can't shake the feeling of the curse looming just behind each toast. This is the life of a sailor, where luck is interwoven with libations, and the fates may enjoy toying with anyone foolish enough to think one night's revelry won't follow like a lost anchor in the cold, dark sea. So, remember as you down your last mug. Tomorrow morning, when the hangover sets in, it won't just be your head pounding, but the remnants of the curses you've entangled yourself in after one too many. Ahoy! Welcome to life on the high seas, where good fortune is a fickle friend, and the drunken sailor's curse dances ever close. Why would anyone want to bid farewell? Saying goodbye might just be too much for your next grave misfortune. Each sailor knows better than to utter those fateful words. Here you are, trying to cling to camaraderie, and the morbid belief that voicing your fears could spell doom. Picture yourself aboard a rickety ship, bobbing up and down like a cork in a maelstrom, surrounded by salty sea mates. As night falls, you gather around a flickering lantern, camaraderie crackling in the air, but every whisper of goodbye sends shivers down your spine. What's the alternative, you ask? Ah, memory. Instead of the dreaded farewell, you recount tales of epic sea battles or near-miss whirlpools, invoking the ghosts of sailors long past. You find humour in the darkest of times. It's the only way to keep your sanity intact. But as you regale your shipmates with the story of the time old Tom slipped on the deck and fell into the fish barrel, which incidentally only deepens your belief in the curse of the fish, you can feel their unease. Just don't mention goodbye, they chime in unison, all too aware of the calamities that might follow. Then, out of nowhere, a voice pipes up from the shadows. You know what's worse than saying goodbye? Talking about it. The laughter that erupts is almost a salve for the collective tension. Ah, yes, laughter becomes your lifeboat against the crushing weight of superstition. With every chuckle, you reaffirm your unspoken pact. No goodbyes, just memories. So, instead of bidding adieu as the ship sails into the unknown, you invent ridiculous alternatives. Happy sailing, old friend. Or, may your next port be filled with rum and not scurvy. It's become an unintentional competition to see who can get the most absurd, as if the fabric of reality could be altered by sheer creativity. Of course, the irony is rich. You're surrounded by comrades who are all too aware of the ship's potential pitfalls. One wrong wave, and you could find yourself tumbling over the side, quite literally tossing caution to the wind. But don't let a little detail like gravity ruin your fun. Instead, you'll craft elaborate rituals around saying nothing directly. Fancy a cheerio instead of a farewell? How about a quick turn of the head? You could even gesture dramatically toward the horizon, as if to catch some cosmic beacon that has all the answers. Talk about an impressive display of nautical nonsense. As you toss out phrases like smooth sailing or see you on the flip side, the shipmates nod knowingly. The true clever bit here is pretending success is guaranteed by omission. In doing so, you allow everyone on board to suspend critical thinking. Anything is possible in the whimsical, crushing waves of destiny. But don't fret. The superstitious banter, twisted yet charming, creates a shared experience stronger than the vessel itself. All the while, the ship creaks and groans under the stress of the waves, adding a dramatic flair to your attempts at levity. Now, there are some aboard who, still caught in the stupor of superstition, choose to avoid the subject altogether. A heavy silence sometimes falls, and glances at the horizon turn into furtive avoidance of both the sea and each other. They bite down hard on their tongues, willing the dreaded goodbye away from their lips, drowning their thoughts in rum instead. It's a universal truth that nothing cures anxiety like a bit of liquid courage, and soon enough, every round inspires a raucous rendition of sea shanties, or at least a valiant attempt. Just then, as you finish your toast to eternal journeys and chummy laughter, A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the ship, sending an icy shiver through you. One sailor, caught in a moment of unguarded vulnerability, squeaks out a goodbye, as if it were an incantation. The laughter halts. Eyes dart around as if to confirm the catastrophe. Did time stop? Did fate clash? Did the legends swirl together to produce a watery marvel, or calamity? But amidst the chaos of superstition, laughter reigns once again. Because in this strange cocoon of absurdity, you realise you've woven a tight-knit family, all expertly avoiding the unmentionable while embracing the tumultuous journey ahead. After all, on the high seas, the only true farewell is the one you never say. Because who really wants doom following you to the next bar? That's just bad luck. So toast to all things bizarre, and let the waves carry your spirits high above any saltwater grave you might fear. It's time to dive into the galley, and the stench of failed pirate stews fills the air. As you prepare for culinary catastrophes, remember, the wrong pot might just turn your crew against you, or cause a revolt based on the lack of proteins. What could possibly go wrong? You'll find out soon enough. Imagine the scene. You're huddled around a rusted pot that was lovingly acquired from a shipwreck last summer. It glimmers tantalizingly, but upon closer inspection you note that the surface is more pitted than a 50-year-old sailor's face. The contents of the pot, a concoction comprising dubious chunks of salted shark, tasteless root vegetables that might double as ship's fittings, and a splash of questionable fish oil, are bubbling violently. You might as well be attempting to brew a potion for impending doom. But hey, a pirate's got to eat, right? As you attempt to stir the bubbling monstrosity, a quick side glance reveals a few of the crew grimacing, their expressions resembling that of someone who's just bitten into a lemon dipped in vinegar. It doesn't help that the previous night's debauchery included a few too many rounds of rum, leaving everyone with a touch of morning nausea. The realization dawns. Your stew may unleash a greater threat than the tempestuous seas you're sailing. Will a revolution break out for a better meal? Will the crew draft a formal complaint to their captain citing disgusting grub? Only time will tell. And just as you're about to add a sign of respect by flinging a sprig of seaweed into the pot for flavour, because why not, the eager crew starts popping in like popcorn, each one hoping to catch a whiff and possibly wincing at what they find. "Where's me bacon, you blubbering fool?" yells old Flint, who's half awake and still wearing yesterday's soggy hat like a badge of honour. You realise you've forgotten to account for the vital elements of flavour. Refried coffee beans and breadcrumbs are not the culinary gold a pirate needs to stay motivated at sea. Ever try to please a crewman with nothing but stale hardtack? No. Count yourself lucky. Let's face it, serving anything with the texture of a weather-beaten seagull carcass on deck is a recipe for disaster. If you think they're cranky now, wait until they find a weevil in their ration of bread. The mere sight of bugs scuttling across their supper could send these burly buccaneers into a frenzy as they consider a mutiny for better provisions. "If you think I'll dine on crunchy critters, you've lost your mind," booms Mad Jenkins, and suddenly you're back to square one, commandeering the remains of the stale bread like an overzealous chef prepped for a cooking show gone wrong. The ship pitches and rolls beneath your feet, adding to the chaos as you try to salvage the pot's gritty contents. Rumours circulate that the ocean holds greater treasures than what's cooking on your stove, and you can almost see the descent brewing like the bubbling stew. Just as you ponder bypassing this meal altogether and proposing a daring raid on the next vessel for supplies, you catch a glimpse of the horizon. A merchant ship. The crew's eyes glimmer with newfound hope, and suddenly they're ready to brave the seas again, if only for a chance to taste something edible. With one final stir of the pot, you drop a few sprigs of another herb into the mixture that looks a bit too much like garden weeds, but might pass for seasoning. Alright lads, gather round. Today's menu, surprise stew. The laughter echoes across the deck. mixing with the inopportune moments of grimacing. As each crew member reluctantly dips their bowls, the moment of truth draws near. The first slurp belongs to a brave soul, and as the taste buds awaken you wait, holding your breath as he contemplates what to say. Will it elicit tears of joy or an exaggerated gag reflex? And much to your bewilderment, the taste passes judgment. Some of the crew members erupt into laughter, caught between the peculiar flavours and panic spiralling into fits of giggles. In truth, no one expected fine dining aboard a ship, but they still long for something better than old parched dog food. Perhaps the next magical concoction will leave them feeling satisfied. Or maybe you'll be living off rat meat for the next week as punishment. A culinary catastrophe turned into comedic relief. Here's to luck, someone toasts, raising their bowls to the ceiling of the dim galley. And to your cooking, may it never happen again. With the entire ship chuckling as they settle into their meals, the dreadful stew is transformed into legend, gathering stories as they recount tales of kitchen woes. You may survive to cook again another day. The most important lesson learned: don't fish for compliments or food out of the ocean without a safety net. Now I'm ready for the outro whenever you are.